Hi, I'm Aaron Clausen, the City of Lynn Principal Planner.
And I'm Lauren Drago, the City of Lynn Associate Planner. Today we'll be sharing an update on the South Harbor Implementation Plan, which was finalized in the summer of 2024. This is the same information we'll be sharing at our September 15th, 2025 SHIP update meeting. To start, Aaron, can you walk us through what was in the South Harbor Implementation Plan?
Absolutely, happy to. So the plan is the culmination of a lot of work that the community has carried out over the years to create a vision for redevelopment on the waterfront, to provide housing, economic development, and better access to those amenities that are on the waterfront. The South Harbor Implementation Plan, as it might be suggested in the title, gives us a more strategic and tactical roadmap for implementing those visions that have been created over time. One of the key aspects of that is improving transportation access on the waterfront. The plan envisioned creating a street network that would connect downtown through Blossom Street and Commercial Street that exists currently today, but thinking about how Circle Ave and then a future Navy Road connecting along that street grid could create a complete network that provides better access for all users along the waterfront, including existing commercial users, residents that are going to be living there, access to the waterfront amenities, so that we can manage traffic a little bit better. It also envisions utilizing transit as much more of an important role in moving people to and from the site. The second piece that we really drilled into with the plan was the land use and development framework, where we tried to create a little bit greater idea what can work in terms of mixed-use residential housing on the north and south part of the waterfront, and then looking at the central waterfront area as an opportunity for industrial, commercial development, and some research and development to create more job opportunities for Lynners across the spectrum of the economy.
I know we also passed zoning recently. Do you want to talk a little bit about the zoning process and how it relates to the SHIP?
Yes, so following on the Vision Lynn process, the city has begun to implement many of the short-term actions that were called out in that plan, one of them being the South Harbor Implementation Plan. Another one is to rewrite our zoning code to align with the land use and urban form objectives that were laid out in that plan. And so the land use layout here that we saw and talked a little bit about that envisions sort of mixed-use residential neighborhoods along the southern portion of the site, and as well as the northern portion of the site, with an innovation district in the middle. Required some change to the zoning code to sort of incent that kind of use and ensure that redevelopment of those properties are aligned with those objectives, providing both a mix of housing and economic development and job opportunity. The other piece of that too is that making sure that as development happens along here, we can find ways to connect the street grid that was envisioned in the South Harbor Implementation Plan through the development review process.
So, Aaron, I know one of the aspects of the SHIP plan was to think through all the developments that we were seeing in the pipeline at the time. Do you want to share some updates on those projects that have happened in the last year?
I'd be happy to, thank you. First, right now, many of you may have noticed that at the 810 Linway property, there's a development that is underway. The first phase of that, it's called the Shipwright, is part of a larger 550-unit residential project that was entitled for development about 2 years ago. So that's the first phase. We expect to see the second phase starting soon. That first building is going to have 320 residential units, and they're leasing up right now. The second project is the South Harbor project that Samuels and Associates has submitted for approval at the city and working through the state entitlements. That project includes 3 buildings over 3 phases that will eventually include 850 residential units, around 26,000 square feet of commercial retail space, restaurants, retail, that kind of thing, to activate and create sort of a center, a commercial center for the waterfront. That project also includes an 8-acre park along the Saugus River, right along here, and a public promenade that would connect up with future open space opportunities on the waterfront. The third project that is ready to go in the development pipeline is 811 Linway. That's this project right here on the other side of the road. That's a project that includes over 200 residential units, includes around 7,000 square foot of retail and restaurant space on the ground floor, and really shows us that there is movement and transition that's happening on the southern portion of the waterfront. This last project is the 626 Lynnway project right here on the Lynnway. This is the former Gorelick property, Gorelick Creamery. The first phase of this is to take and repurpose the creamery building itself into industrial commercial uses. Over 100,000 square feet has already been redeveloped and reused in that property with only 40,000 square feet left. So that's a really exciting opportunity, an example of how we can see the central waterfront portion of this project repurposed for job-creating kinds of uses. As we move forward, we also can see that the waterfront harbor park is the first stage of redevelopment that will allow more open space and activity on our waterfront, thinking about open space as a driver for economic development on the waterfront. Recently, the harbor park's first phase was delivered with over 25 acres of open space. The second phase of which we're starting to move into, which includes the restoration of the shoreline, which will continue right along here and create that promenade opportunity to connect up with some of these other development projects that we talked a little about earlier. The last project underway on the waterfront is along 330 Lynnway. That's the northern section of our waterfront, right here behind what a lot of folks know as the Clock Tower property. That project is a relatively small but important one, where it's the construction of the pathway that will connect up eventually with Heritage State Park and the pathway that was built with the breakwater development. And what that will do when that's done later on this calendar year, will connect up the ferry terminal property right here, where you can get access to ferry transit into Boston. It will provide a pedestrian and bicycle facility that will take you all the way up to those park facilities and downtown eventually. Again, improving on access to the waterfront for both transportation purposes, but also access to amenities and development opportunity.
That transportation was a really important theme that came out of the SHIP plan. Another key factor of that is the ferry terminal, which has had fantastic ridership. We had over 10,000 riders in July alone this year. So folks are really using this to get to Boston, and we're advocating to increase that service and make it year-round as soon as possible. In addition, there's also a project right now to reimagine the Lynnway right through the middle of the South Harbor area. We have a federal grant that is ready to go. We're working with our partners at MBTA, MassDOT, DCR. That project is still in the community engagement phase right now. Construction will start closer to 2029. And so this is a great time to get involved in that project and share your input so that you can be a part of this complete reimagining of the Lynnway. And that information about that process will be available on our webpage. Finally, we're also talking about train access in this project as well. The Riverworks station right now is located next to the GE facilities, and our proposal in the SHIP is to move that to the north and provide access both north and south of the railway and make it a fully functioning public train station, just like Central Square. We received a $550,000 grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to work with the MBTA on the feasibility studies and the initial research that we need to do in order to make that feasible. So we've talked about a lot of the great updates that are happening in the South Harbor neighborhood, and we talked about some of the challenges too. We need to keep thinking about how we can support affordable housing development in the neighborhood. We've heard from the community that that is a big priority, and that shoreline restoration project is going to be really important as well. One thing we haven't spoken about yet is the importance to bring more jobs into the South Harbor area. Something that was really important to Lynners and Vision Lynn, and as we went through the SHIP process, it's clear that this neighborhood is a place where we can see more jobs in Lynn. Today, 84% of Lynners who are working at jobs outside of the city. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, we'd like to make sure that there's a lot of economic opportunities here in the city for folks to make a living wage. And in the South Harbor area alone, it might feel like when you're driving the Lynnway and you see all those businesses that there's a lot of jobs, but the South Harbor area only holds 9% of the jobs in Lynn, despite having 30% of our commercial, industrial, and mixed-use property. So this is an area where we can accommodate more job growth. Additionally, the jobs that we do have in the South Harbor area about a third of them are retail jobs. In Lynn, these jobs tend to be the lowest paying of all of the industries in Lynn. And so we'd like to be finding opportunities to get different kinds of jobs, both in Lynn as a whole, but to really push the jobs that are in the South Harbor into more higher paying industries so that folks can be making family sustaining wages. In the next slide here, we also are thinking about the importance of tax revenue. It might not be something you think about as a constituent every day, but it's important to us that we're bringing in the revenues we need to provide the level of service that Lynners deserve. And as you can see from this slide, this is a graphic that shows the total value of a parcel divided by the acreage of that parcel. And so you see in the downtown, there's this really tall column. That is the Caldwell downtown. It's only 0.66 acres, but it has an assessed value of close to $80 million. If we scroll back down to the South Harbor area where we're talking about right now, you can see it's a lot lower to the ground. You see the shipwright coming through now, a $67 million assessed value across 5.8 acres. So that's great. You're seeing some of these newer developments show up. But really, this highlights that across all of the wards, everyone sort of contributes to our fiscal health as a city, but there's more that we can be getting out of that South Harbor neighborhood to ensure the long-term fiscal sustainability of the city. So another challenge that we will be tackling in the next year for the SHIP implementation is street grid acquisitions. And so if you look at this map here, this is from our plan. It's available on our webpage, but you're seeing that there's all sorts of different little slivers of parcel throughout the district that we see as really key to rebuilding a street grid in this neighborhood. In many cases, these are historic roads that we've lost over time, so we're trying to restore some of that connectivity. It makes it a lot easier for people to get through the district, and as Aaron mentioned before, it's important for accommodating both the truck traffic we need for our big employers, as well as pedestrians and bikers and car drivers that are just making their way through the neighborhood on any given day. Now, some of these parcels that Aaron mentioned will be accommodated through the zoning change, which required, if I owned the Walmart property and was going to be redeveloping that, the regulation is now that I would be building a right-of-way through that development. So this covers some of those changes Aaron was mentioning in the zoning earlier. But another challenge that we're facing in the district is stuck development parcels. And there's two that I'd like to talk about that I'll show here. The first is the Gearworks site. So if you remember, that used to be the location where we had the Gearworks plant from GE. It has been vacant for a very long time. And then we also have this collection of National Grid parcels. So not every parcel they own in the district, but these are the ones that are really, really frustrating us right now. If we go to the next slide, we have some images for the Gearworks site. So, sometimes these parcels that get stuck, sometimes it's just a matter of being patient, working with the property owner, being proactive. And we have tried to do that with the Gearworks site. What you're seeing here is a vision that we put together through Vision Lynn with the community. So the idea was we took everything we were hearing from the community in our meetings and really tried to visualize what that would mean for a site like Gearworks. We've also been meeting with the ownership team probably dozens of times in the past couple of years to talk about this site. We also worked to arrange a life sciences developer tour. I believe we had almost 70 developers come visit that site as a part of that tour to think about whether it could be a site for future life sciences development. We've also made more one-on-one introductions with a variety of developers over the years. And I mentioned, of course, that Riverworks grant that we got to move forward, that train station, that directly supports their property and makes it possible for them to build more housing on that parcel eventually. But on the next slide, you can see the photos of what it looks like today. Despite having had a fully permitted project ready to go for years, This has not started on construction. It does not seem to be moving forward in any meaningful way. There's been opportunities to improve access to the site over the years, which is definitely one of these sites' biggest challenges. We haven't seen the ownership team really make any progress on that, and in some cases let some really good opportunities fall through. Additionally, when we've sent them possible partners or businesses that might be tenants there, when we've tried to support the development of this parcel, a lot of times the feedback we get is they didn't really answer the phone, or they didn't seem like they were serious. They didn't seem to really want to talk to us. So that's really been frustrating. And today it's basically an illegal contractor's yard. I mean, you can see here, I think I'm seeing tires on the ground. These are just cars and trucks that are parked here. So this is basically just a vacant mess that I think could really be one of the most crucial development sites for the city of Lynn. Really feeling frustrated about this.
To your point, Lauren, this is one of the key critical redevelopment opportunities that we have on the entire waterfront. Given its size, given its proximity to future transit, we have really intended and worked closely in a collaborative manner with the property and try to see this move forward in an expeditious way. And I think you can sense here that there's an opportunity for us to look at other methods and tactics to keep it going.
Mm-hmm. And then the other site we mentioned, the National Grid properties. We can see on the next slide what those are looking like today. And National Grid, it's a different scenario a little bit. You're dealing with a big multinational company. We've been very proactive with meetings. They've had a lot of different staffing changes over the years. We've met with them, again, many, many times. One thing we had requested regularly through our EDIC Lynn was to paint this big LNG tank. A lot of other communities you'll see nearby have these cool murals on their tank. We would love to paint ours. And then we've been doing our best. EDIC Lynn owns a lot of the land near this, and they have been doing great work, actively managing their sites, making sure they look really good, keeping really good care of them. But as you'll see on the next slide, we're dealing with similar frustrations where this land is not really being utilized well. It is contaminated land, so from National Grid's perspective, I think they just want to leave it alone as is. They don't feel the impacts of these vacant sites the way that we as a community do. And recently, pretty frustrating, but they demolished a building on the site, which we really wanted them to do. It was in rough shape, but then they immediately leased the land out for stockpiling. And so now when you drive past the Lynnway and you're going near where that ferry terminal is, where a lot of folks are coming into our community to use transit, you just see this piles of junk that they're keeping on their site. That is very, very frustrating for us. And furthermore, you'll know the LNG tank, still not painted, still white. This feels like low-hanging fruit. And so it's really frustrating that even the easy stuff, we're not really making much progress on right now.
Yeah, you can really see that although it's a different dynamic being a utility, there's a lot of opportunity that's being missed for smaller tactical interventions to make it a development opportunity for, in this case, commercial and industrial, some of those job creation opportunities. So we want to see this advance, whether or not it's at a whole redevelopment of the property or sort of singular improvements to that whole area that bring about that vision of the waterfront.
Yes, yeah. And so I think we're at a point now where we're trying to decide what options we have as a community, and we're coming to the community to see what you think our best options are for moving forward. Aaron, do you think you could talk us through some of those tactics that might be available to us?
Absolutely, sure. And we've talked about them a little bit earlier, particularly around the street network, where we implemented zoning a year ago, less than a year ago, frankly, that sets up the process by which redevelopment of these properties could provide connections, particularly along Circle Ave. As Lauren pointed out, a number of the roadways that were identified in the South Harbor implementation plan are owned by utilities or by the MBTA. So there's an opportunity for us to work with those institutions in a negotiated manner to provide for improvements that create roadways and roadway connections. The third way for the street network is, again, through eminent domain and takings to work with the property owner to take a small sliver of property to make that connection so that we have that connecting network. That's something that we can look at now as a tool for all those different approaches. The third piece that we want to look at, and this really brings into the conversation around these stuck properties, is we can look at a couple different other planning processes that can help give us more tools as a community to look at taking property through eminent domain, like a redevelopment authority or an urban renewal plan. Again, really building on the community engagement that we've exhibited through Vision Lynn and through the South Harbor implementation plan to ensure that that plan gets implemented in the best interest of the community. Another approach very similar to an urban renewal plan is an economic development plan that would be managed to the Economic Development Industrial Corp, EDIC, could take the lead on that planning process. But these give us a tool to identify how we can approach those properties that are stuck so that we can make sure they're being redeveloped and utilized consistent with the plan, the larger South Harbor implementation plan, but the community's interest in creating jobs and new housing.
Yes, yeah, and to underline what you're saying, I think there's an opportunity here where we can talk to property owners and try to purchase property, as you said, or in some specific cases take it by eminent domain. But an urban renewal plan or an economic development plan opens up the opportunities. There's clear processes around community engagement and approval processes, so this would be its own sort of process to move forward, but it would really push stuck development parcels like the ones we mentioned here, hopefully into more fruitful conversations with the city moving forward. But we are really interested to hear what the community thinks about this. We have a project page at www.lynncommunitytv.com/ship, and we welcome any feedback you have about any of the information we shared today. In particular, we're really interested in what you think you would want the city to do in order to tackle these stuck development sites. We feel like we've been doing everything that we can so far, so this is really our time to come to you and see if you have any other ideas or whether you think the urban renewal plan or economic development plan might be the right path forward for this neighborhood. So I encourage you to reach out to us through the project page and let us know if you have any questions, but we look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.